ulichunwa, ulichapwa, ulikuwa punished in a certain way. Do you believe that kids right now need to be punished the way you are punished? Do they need the soft parenting that people are doing right now?
To discipline or not to discipline? And I think this came about from a post that was, the conversation derived from a post that was posted pertaining to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, I think the son, posted about the mother being whatever.
So,
and then,
so for those who didn't read it, what did that post say?
Yeah. So the post itself, that's what I was trying to pull up before you ambushed a brother.
Okay.
Was, where is it? It's right here. So, Mukoma wa Ngugi. So this was a screenshot that was shared. And sometimes, validity sometimes. But what we can derive from the conversation is much more better. A mother's novelist, lonely life. So he says here, my father physically abused my late mother. He would beat her up. Some of my earliest memories are me going to visit her at my grandmother's, where she would seek refuge. But with that said, it is the silencing of who she was that gets me. Okay, I've said it. From that, we derived a conversation of kuchapwa. Disciplining.
Yeah.
And that is where now it was a matter of to discipline or not to discipline.
Yeah, but you explain how the conversation started, but you haven't explained the process of the conversation.
Okay.
Anyway, for this particular, this is how the conversation started, and the conversation went on terms of like somebody was asking, okay, fine, like when somebody comes out now, when the mom is dead, and they explain this, what that they're exploiting, and people said like, and the good thing about this is that a lot of other people had accused Ngugi wa Thiong'o of the same abuse. So now his son speaking about it exonerates what he was hiding before. And then the story segued to what it is right now and what you're talking right now in terms of discipline, because it segued to come into a position whereby like it moved on from Ngugi wa Thiong'o and his bad behaviors. It moved on to where it's able to a point whereby children these days, it is actually like a suggestion, like children these days, we have people who these days will say that they were abused when they were young, because right now they have that, like the world sees it like that. And that is where the discussion came out, where we were like, okay, were we abused or were we disciplined? And will children this age be disciplined the way we were and say it's normal, or does abuse evolve over the times? Like what we think is normal right now will be different. With the children right now, kunyang'anywa simu na kupelekwa time out, will they come back in the future and say they were abused emotionally or in any other kind of way? But now the thing is, right now as a parent right now, you were ulichunwa, ulichapwa, ulikuwa punished in a certain way. Do you believe that kids right now need to be punished the way you are punished? Do they need the soft parenting that people are doing right now? And what is it raising in society right now? How are we looking right now? Are kids too soft? Do they know how to handle life out there based on how they've been raised right now? Should we go back to how we were punished, or is that abuse?
Thank you, Mika, for the summary.
Good summary.
Good summary.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll always start first by saying, being, a self-taught student of history. Over time, not only disciplining kids, like so many social norms, they change over time. So, I mean, I think when we look at things in the context of, I'll give an example. My late grandmother was married at the age of 16, and I think this was in the 1940s when she got married, if I'm calculating right. She was actually actually not 16. 16 she had a firstborn. She was married at the age of 15. So if we look at that today, and
that context.
yes,
That's the failure.
yeah, and I think my grandfather was like, I think at that time was about maybe in his early 30s or late 20s, like I have to go back and calculate. So that, like a 30-year-old having a child with 16, marrying a 15-year-old, and then having a child with a 16-year-old, that would clearly be called abuse. Now, if we bring back, and these are conversations I used to have with my grandmother, she would even wonder, like, what are you talking about? Because that was the norm
Back
at
then.
that particular time. I mean, today, hata ukiwa 21 years old, na unataka kuoa, unaambiwa bado wewe ni mdogo.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like we have to be very careful, like how we talk about our parents, people in previous generations, what they did, and what were the norms of that time. And the reason why I say that is because even we today, as parents or as people living in this world today, we also have to know that there's no, I don't believe there's any generation that did not make mistakes.
100%.
So we also are not exempt. There are mistakes that we'll make that we are blind to today, but maybe 20 years down the line we'll be like, you know what?
You will be judged harshly about, very harshly.
So ndo nasema 20 years down the line. So when we are judging, let's also remember that our parents, when they were disciplining us, because even at that particular time there were norms, there were some forms of discipline at that time that were considered abuse. So to me, I think before we move very fast to
condemning and
to condemn that
throwing stones,
alikuwa anachapa watoto, I think we need to first of all figure out what was considered normal at that particular time. You see, for example, like my mother, like how she would somea me, na hata vile yani nimefanya kitu ujinga, hata nishika sikio nichuna nipeleke huku na nirudi. At that time, me, I was emotionally intact. Nimechunwa tu na ikaisha. But today, that's gonna affect a child today. So can I go back and start saying that based on today's standards, that was abuse? Because even at that particular time, my mother, for example, hakuwa mtu wa kuchapa sana. But even at that particular time,
she just left it to her brothers.
She left it to my uncles, who are very efficient. At that time, there were norms that this is excessive and this is okay. So I think when we are judging, we should try to judge with the norms of that society and the standards by which people were living at the time.
Let me also add to that.
Yeah.
You were raised by a single mother.
Yes.
I was raised by a single mother. At that particular point in time, the norm was single mothers were not put in the positive light.
No.
They were not looked at as let's say positive. No matter what the circumstance.
Yeah.
You're supposed to whatever you are going through, you persevere.
Yeah.
But it was rare in our time to hear that, like, okay, single mother. But because everywhere you looked,
everyone had a father and a mother.
The whole unit was complete.
Yeah.
The whole unit was complete.
There are some schools that would not even admit students with I know people don't know that, but there are some schools that would not admit students with single parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is also something else. Now, being single is the norm. It's sort of becoming a norm.
It's becoming a norm. And that's why I say
and very acceptable.
Yeah. Very acceptable.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I I think also what's happening, and again, there's sometimes a definition or a line that is blurred between being a parent and being a friend. That line is, the clear demarcation is not there, where you are a parent.
No, I think what you're trying to say is that, and for me, usually, I will never blame the kids for this. I'll blame the parents. We want to be cool parents so bad.
That's the
so
problem
bad
right
that we blur the lines between parenting and raising kids. And I've usually told people these things: your kids are not your friends.
Correct.
There is a boundary that you're supposed to grow, whereby the kids should understand you are the parent and they are the kids. These people who want to be friends with their kids are the same people who, after a while, when those kids think that they are grown, they lose control of those kids. Then they will try to blame everybody by themselves, by the mere fact that when you brought this person to a level where they see themselves next to you, even when you try to instill discipline, they will not listen to you. Because at the end of the day, they don't see you as a parent, they see you as your bra, you're my homie. Right? Now, I can take it whereby we have come to a place whereby we are learning new things because we're in a different country. We're in conflict between on how we were raised to the laws of this country and to the kids who are interacting with other kids who are being raised over here. And you're caught in between and you're trying to actually be the best parent you can be to your kid. And that goes up to the way of where you're supposed to be in understanding that as part of you being a parent, disciplining your kid is part of parenthood. Your kid will always look at you as that person who provides love and care and protection to them, but they'll also look at you as that person who's interfering in their way of them being independent and being their own person. And when your interference is not coming from a bad place, but it's coming from a place of love, it's allowed. Even at work, there's disciplinary action at work because they understand that if they let you on your ways, you will not adhere to what the company wants you to do. We have rules and laws in society to guide us on how to live in a certain pattern, how things are supposed to be. So you cannot eliminate that from the family setting in the terms of I want to be a cool parent. I want to be that parent who, yeah, maybe you had a problem with your father beating you and your mother beating you. I hear a lot of people who came in the generation after us, and some of us complain that when they came here with their parents didn't love them. Yes, guess what? Your parent didn't love you because your parent was doing doubles to ensure that you went to a good school, lived in a good neighborhood. Most of you don't have student loans. If you have student loans, the student loans that you took because you wanted to take, but not because your parents didn't pay for your school. All this is because for them, their love was to avoid raising you in the inner city, giving you a good life over here, making sure that you live in a good neighborhood. You're raised well, you don't end up in gangs, you go to school, you end up with a good career. Yes, they were not hugging you every night. They were not there every weekend to see you, but they had come here, they were working jobs, they would not work at home, but they will still work those jobs to provide for you.
Okay.
If you don't see that as love, and you feel like my parents didn't love me, didn't care of me, it's the same way when you assume you're raising that kid of yours softly, but you're not disciplining them in a good way. When your kid turns out to be not such a good member of society, they will blame you for not providing a good foundation for them.
Okay, Asante Mika. Now, anyone who has an alternative viewpoint, I'd like to hear alternative viewpoints. The number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. And the alternative viewpoint is maybe you feel our parents just got it wrong. We figured it out in this generation. They just need to admit that they were wrong. Because there are people maybe who feel that way. And I'm gonna go through some of the comments that are coming through. I can see Esther Mulusa here said it's true that Ngugi's first wife died in his absence, and when he returned to Kenya, he did not even as much as visit her grave. Her family took that very badly. And then Esther Father says, in the West, people fight with words. Even if a child is not physically beaten, they can be psychologically abused. The latter can be more damaging. The one problem I have, with generally what the West does, by the West I mean Europe and America, is that they usually go through these phases in their society where they're using, corporal punishment against kids. So that's okay when they're using it. But when they switch, they start labeling other societies as societies that don't follow children rights. When some of these things, like even corporal punishment, like in American schools, these things were very recent. They used to happen as recently, I think, as the 60s and the 70s. It still used to happen. But because there was a shift, they now start labeling other people. And that's the same conversation with the alphabet conversation we're having, but that's not a conversation for today, where when they change, they label other societies as people who are uncouth, uncivilized, and all kinds of words. And then Esther Mulusa says, Mtume. I don't know what exactly you mean by Mtume. I know Mtume is a prophet. So, or rather, I don't know that it's Mtume ile tuma mtu. So tell us what Mtume means there.
Maybe it's Mtume the musician.
Okay. Oh, there's Mtume a musician?
Yes.
Okay.
The one who sang Joseph.
Okay, then that's a false prophet, because but anyway, kuna watu wengi
wanajita. I'm just saying, sijui.
Aya, sasa Sambaza, Steven anasema Sambaza podcast did a podcast series on child discipline and had African Americans with diaspora people who described discipline when they were growing up. Now they saw things that are not right in today's society. Ni hayo tu. And then I can see, I can see, let me see. I'm going to come back to Tabitha's comments because I think I want us to analyze that. So I'm going to come back to that. Akenyi says, those of us who want to be friends with our kids, tuende tent gani. No, Akenyi, 202-683-4570, any viewpoints are open. And I'm not saying, it's not okay. So Mika is the one who feels different, but I'm not saying
this. When we say that don't be friends with your kids, I'm not saying that be an enemy to your kid. No, I will tell you one thing. I am my daughter's favorite person to hang out with. Like when best yangu mbaya, but we have lights.
She knows where the line is. She knows where the line is. Okay.
She knows. Hata mimi najua kuna vitu zenye kuna boundaries. Tunajua pale ziko. Unfortunately, so many people think that for you to be in a situation with a kid whereby you're cool with them and open na wewe anafanya nini, you have to be overly friendly. You forget about being a parent.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And that's what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not saying that don't be cool with your friend ati watoto wako kuogope. No. Your kid should be able to talk to you as the first person whenever they feel anything. Anafaa kuwa free enough kuongelesha in any way.
Okay.
Anataka anafaa kuwa akikuwa na doubt, akikuwa na fear, akikuwa na dream, akikuwa na hope, akikuwa na ile, you're the first person they talk to you. You have to have that.
Okay.
But pia anafaa kujua, like, there's a point where ukimwambia it's my way, it's my way.
Aya, Bena Ketchup anasema our parents got it right. That is why we are where we are. Ali Badawi is right in that we cannot try to recreate history by using today's standards as a benchmark of what is right. Okay, so let me go back to Tabitha and Jerry. And Tabitha says, well, I cannot speak for all African cultures. I can speak for the Agikuyu. The pre-colonial Agikuyu did not use violence as a primary mechanism to discipline their children. In fact, in the late 1800s, when corporal punishment was so big in the UK, ethnographists studying the Agikuyu for about 5 years were shocked at how disciplined the Agikuyu children were without corporal punishment, which was the norm in Europe. This is documented. Corporal punishment was adopted as a primary form of discipline by the Agikuyu in the post-colonial period. I say that to bring up that when people say kuchapa watoto is the African way, we should explore if this is the truth or simply post-colonial history imported to us that we have adopted. So one quick reaction, I have to what Tabitha said, like Tabitha, of course, has done a lot of research on Agikuyu culture. For those who are not familiar, what was the name of that podcast again? So I don't butcher the name.
Matire Gemi.
Yeah, Matire Gemi. Yeah, the podcast is in English, but Tabitha is on that podcast, and they're talking a lot about Kikuyu culture, which is very good. And that's the reason why I say with each generation, norms change. So these norms could change for whatever reason. They could change for whatever reason. It could be colonialism. It could be, so there was a norm that was there during pre-colonial Agikuyu times. Then at some point, because of the colonial influence, there's this new system that was adopted. Like, we adopted so many things. We want to start counting the things we adopted from the colonial past. And I'll give a quick example. People, for example, look at it as very abnormal. Like when Muslims bury within a day or two. That used to be the norm in a lot of African cultures. Before,
Kikuyus used to throw you in the forest.
Before the colonizer came and people started shifting, and like to using caskets to bury and stuff like this. So there's so many things that changed. It wasn't only the discipline of children, but what I was talking about in historical context, because even us, there's so many things that we're doing differently because of influences that we got from wherever. And here, personally, I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong way to raise a child, because sometimes you would not even know. Even us in this world today, like there's certain blind spots that we can't talk about because we are blind to them.
Yes.
And maybe 20 years down the line, like our kids might be doing a podcast and say, hey, Maze, our parents, they were taking our tablets, our electronics, and keeping them away from us for 3 days. So let's also be prepared for that. But when you're doing that today as a parent, are you thinking of yourself as an abusive parent, or are you thinking of yourself as, I'm trying to discipline my child in a way that they're going to become a better person in the society?
Let me ask you something. Are we currently, when we use the word discipline, right now, even in this particular conversation, are we talking about beating?
So I think,
do you mean corporal punishment?
So I think discipline,
no. Whipping,
no wait,
slapping,
discipline is associated, and especially from our generation, discipline is associated a lot with and I would not even call it corporal, because corporal punishment used to be implemented in school, kama kuchapwa viboko. Like
sasa si kama nyumbani. So I don't know what
so unaona sasa kama si kwetu, si atu kuchapwa na viboko, like
mshipi.
Yeah, hiyo mshipi was common in a lot of African households.
My mother and her aunties gunyo hapa katikati hapa kwa tayo.
Ama hiyo kuchapwa thighs.
Yes.
Like kulikuwa na zile vitu unachapwa na mshipi, unapigwa na slippers, unachunwa hivi. Those are things like to a point where ulikuwa ushazoea, unajua andachunwa tu alafu ndafanywa hivi na niko sawa na maisha yanaendelea. Like sometimes even you will debate, najisikia kuchunwa leo ama sijisikia kuchunwa. Alafu unaamua hiyo ina make decision yako on what you're going to do. So there's those, but then when we're talking discipline, we're not talking just that at when we're talking discipline, we're talking like whatever way, but as much as the way that you're communicating that correction of that misdemeanor or that mistake has been made. How are you doing it? Are you doing it in a way whereby at some point your kid might feel like you invaded them or you violated them? Like when you think you're doing your disciplining, are you thinking you're doing it to the best ability of where your kid feels Ayuko violated? And if you're doing it in a way where you feel that your kid doesn't feel being violated, does it work? Or do you find yourself, most parents these days actually find themselves being blackmailed into assuming they've disciplined their kids. Most parents these days find that they negotiate in terms of usipofanya hii nitafanya hii, usipofanya hii. So, and you find people who are entitled.
Okay, now
we have a very entitled generation that's coming, that is there and is coming and is still coming in, because you think you're disciplining, but instead of disciplining, you actually you're raising somebody you negotiate for them to get their way.
Now, let me continue reading because Tabitha continued with her comment. She says, so what's wild is that while the Mzungu moved away from violence as a form of discipline, aka corporal punishment, because they realized the problems with it, we completely adopted it and claimed it as our own. Very much also a documented pattern of abused communities. In essence, why is it watu weusi wa Afrika na wa America all claim kuchapwa is the only way for discipline? The one part that I'm going to deviate with Tabitha, like on this is where, because even our society, it's evolving right now. Even in Kenya, we're evolving away from iyo kuchapwa watoto. Watoto nowadays are chapwi sana. So we're also an evolving society. In as much as we may have picked up some bad habits from this or that, the problem I have with which we have, we've all been maybe educated within that Western school of thought, whereby they decide within their community that this is what we are using, and when they're using it, it's okay. But the moment they change it, they flip up on everyone else who's using that system, whether it was copied from them or whether they had it before, and they label those other communities as communities that are abusive. I would not say that I would not communally call a community abusive, which is what sometimes the Western world sometimes wants to do. They might cloak it with certain words like this society does not respect human rights on things that they themselves were doing a few years ago. Or they'll say this society does not respect children's rights based on maybe that society maybe still has people who get married at age 16.
Yes.
When this very society still has laws until today that allow a 14, a 15, a 16-year-old to get married. So we must be very careful before we pick up their narrative and flip on our own communities.
Yes.
Do our communities have issues? Of course.
Of course they do.
Of course we have
100%.
issues. Of course we have issues, but we must be very careful with how generally the Western world tends to frame things. When they flipped on something, they will go and label other people as they tend to use words as people who are against human rights. They may even label them as, they may even use words like terrorists. It happens. They normally use and this is a pattern that happens. So like even within our time, like you can see some people here saying that hawakuchapwa when they were growing up. There were some families where watoi walikuwa hawachapwi na kulikuwa na families ambazo watoi walikuwa wanachapwa. And to me, I would not say that this was right and this was wrong. Neither of them, because I think a parent sometimes has to deal with so many different dynamics. And and that's why I'm saying, personally, I'm not saying that there was any parents who are right by taking this direction, and these ones were wrong by taking this other direction. But what I'm saying is that, when we're trying to judge a generation, let's be very careful, because we are next in line on these things that we are doing. And this norms shift, I'll give you an example of norms shifting. Like the way people never used to spend, especially fathers, they never used to spend a lot of time with their kids. And there was not that expectation even growing up, wacha nikae na mtoto wangu na nini. So now you have people growing up saying, I wish, my father had spent more time with me. We never spent time. So fair enough. But now, how do we know that when our kids are of age, that conversation, that norm will flip and they'll start saying, our parents were helicopter parents. They were always on our case. They never gave us room to breathe. And these things change, by the way. These things flip, they change, and that's where, and I think I started appreciating this more, when I got more into, there's a certain branch of history, I can't remember its name, where it involves study of history with the norms of that particular time. Like right now, ukisikia mtoi miaka 15, 16 anaolewa, you're like, that's abuse. But then if this was 1930, 1940, there was absolutely, like nothing wrong with that, with the standards. We're not saying it was right or wrong, but with the standards of that time. And I'm sure at that time, if you go back to 1940 and you tell someone, wait until someone is being made to wait until age 30 to get married, they will find that very abnormal and very unusual. So that's why we have to remember we are living in a certain context, and there are people who will come after us. And the same way we want to judge ourselves as better than the previous ones, let's also be prepared to be judged in that way on things that we cannot see right now.
Let me also say something. When Tabitha talks about the Gikuyu, and each and every community in that part of time, even let's say before Beberus came or whatever happened, there already was a system and a structure of how things went.
Yes.
Already. So if you're born into this system, you're born into this structure, you're raised in that structure. You're raised in that system. No matter how you look at it. If let's say, for example, like now, let's say, unfortunately, like whatever is going on in Gaza right now, the kids that are being born and they're seeing all this.
Yeah.
These kids will eventually grow up, knowing that these guys are the oppressors. You know, the Israelis, the kids born on the other side, what are they taught in school? The enemies.
Yeah, the guys on the other side.
These guys those are the enemies. So when it comes to discipline or whatever structure, whatever the community did at that point in time, back then, was what everyone was raised in. And that is fact. Whatever the discipline was, if let's say you went and you messed up with a child, with a girl or whatever, there were laws, there was a way to handle that. Right? If you went and you stole, there was a way to handle that. For discipline, there was a way to handle that. And on top of that, when kids were born, roles were already defined. Like if you're going to do this for the boys, we're going to go hunt. So if you're the hunters and gatherers, kazi yanyu is to hunt. Then, if your role is being told, this is what you're going to do, you're going to fix the homestead, or you're going to go look for water, there was also division. Goes to your point, and where the colonialists come, and we've been given a system. Fine. Still, it does not take away from the fact that you need in order to survive. There's a way that you have to be. In order for you to navigate this system, you have to conduct yourself in a certain way. You have to be if you go for a job interview, you can't go there like, yo, my man, what's up, dog? What's good? You're hiring me, and I'm talking to you like, like with boys, like, that's not going to happen. There's a way and there's a decorum. How do you instill that? You instill that from, you're like, yo, there's a way you conduct your stuff. When you're with your boys, this is how you do it. When you're with your girls, this is how you whatever. When you're with your parents, right now, me personally, at this age, I'd be very cautious drinking in front of, like, maybe my mom at my age. When I say drinking and not tea, I'm talking about alcohol.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
For me, like, at my age, I'm going to find it a problem.
Even in your house,
Now Moshe has been too quiet.
But then Moshe has been too quiet.
Moshe has been trying to stop this conversation.
Maybe at my house with my older brothers, when I pour a drink, I usually like, and then I remember I'm at my house. But still, unless one of them pours a drink first, I'll never pour a drink. Because there's that respect that I've been raised with, that you have to respect your elders.
Okay.
So it's normal. Even in legitimate raising, we cannot just do in front of there's something like, kama niko na nyinyi ndabonga pombe, kama niko na nyinyi I will light up. But if I'm with older people, it's not somebody I know, but kuna wamama karibu, there's something I'm not going to do. Not because tunaogopa mimi ni mtoto, but ile heshima nimezoeshwa, this is how you're supposed to be.
But let's also remember that even our own parents, like we said, there's no generation of parents that was perfect. So let's also remember there were some imperfections in how we were raised.
True.
So we're not sitting here and saying that the generation of parents that walichapa watoto wao are the ones who did the perfect form. We're totally not saying that. So what we're saying is that in every generation, there will be a set of norms at that time, and there will be mistakes that will be made. And that's what I'm trying to put across. Like there will be mistakes.
Every generation,
like if I talk about my
every generation is learning on the job.
Yeah, it's learning on the job. Like let's say like the good thing about nowadays, my mother, we candidly talk about some of the things that she feels she should have done differently, and sometimes she blats out even when Kina Unomike and Omosh have come.
Yes.
And she says them, like huyu hapa nilimwaribu because of this and that.
And that's how she looks at it.
Yeah.
But then when you're defining it, when you're looking at it, you're like, no, you didn't spoil me by doing that. That was actually, to me, that was part and parcel of my day-to-day of my living, and part of, I think, haki yangu, so to speak.
And that's the thing. We have those candid conversations, and that's why, like, well, because there's sometimes this tendency, especially when we start going generations further back, to try to apportion blame. And were there, like, are there sets of parents who were not very good in every? Yes, of course,
absolutely.
Yes, there's
100.
of course the 5%, or maybe the 3% or the 1% that was extremely abusive on their children, that neglected them. We are not denying that. Like we're just trying, or like let me speak for myself. I'm just trying to say, let's try to look at things very contextually, and also let's be very careful, because we are next in line. Even as my mother was raising me and thinking she was doing a perfect job, she'll sit candidly today with me and tell me, apana apa, the reason why you're like this and that is because I didn't do this. And sometimes she's right. Sometimes she's right. So I'm here acknowledging, like there are some mistakes made.
But those mistakes of mom, or did you look at them as deficiencies, or did you look at them as, just like Mika was saying, there's it's a living document, you're learning on the job, and there's no real manual that tells you this is the way you're supposed to do A, B, C, D, F, G.
Yeah.
And society changes. Kama tuseme kupewa gari, ama kukuwa na gari. Anyone in our generation, and your generation, my generation, or whatever, kama umepewa gari na mzazi, you are considered spoiled. Right?
Absolutely. I mean,
in fact, people were like, this is
people thought, and this is the thing, may I look at it this way. You are considered spoiled, but then may I look at it this way. A car was one of the most prized possession in a family. You are actually considered responsible enough for them to trust you to drive the car and do stuff with it. No, Rudy, like, if you look at it, watu wanasema nyinyi mmeharibiwa, mmereziwa, mkikanishwa kwa mapaja, mkiendesha gari. But then me, I'm thinking of it, I'll go back and I'll open up a little bit here. When my mom was sick, when she was about to die, when she had cancer, the good thing that we had in the house is that even my youngest brother, Dan, who at that point was 13, could drive her to hospital. So there was never a lack of a driver in the house, because everybody knew how to drive. But everybody else alikuwa wanaona kama watoto wameharibiwa, wamerejiwa in a certain way. But in that point of life is that I've come to realize is that anytime there was an emergency at home, we didn't have to go look for somebody to mwenye anajua kudrive kwa estate.
Ama kutafuta gari.
We had to call somebody who can drive. It was there was somebody in the house who could drive the car and do and go do something. Mtu amekwama mahali, mtu like matatu, like it's raining, one of our sisters wamekwama, hawezi kuja home, somebody could go pick them up. There was always somebody who could move around and do stuff for people. So we can look at things in a certain way, and then you can look at things in a certain way right now. It's just the same way parents right now. You can say umelea watoto wako visoft, umwazoesha kufanya hivi, but then you find that the way you've raised your kid, akijua kuongea na watu uko nje, when other kids are having something, there's a conflict, your kid knows how to resolve conflict, kwa sababu amerezwa in that soft environment ya kuresolve conflict, anajua kuongea. So there's never either a bad or a wrong. It's just that you do your best on how you can raise your kid and hope that that sticks with them in future itakuja msaidie. So we can always say that kuna watu time yetu waliharibiwa na vitu mingi, walikuwa exposed, walikuwa vitu mingi, kina Moshi walikuwa wanafanywa hivi, wangefaa kuwa wanachapwa, wangekuwa wanafanywa hivi, wanafaa kufanywa hivi. But at the end of the day, how did you come out? Watu wenye walikuwa wanachapwa wangapi ni abusive say future in life? How many of them are abusive? And how many people right now can't even have relationship with their own children kwa sababu where they grew up hawakukuwa na hiyo aspect ya nini? Okay, how many people know that the aspect of me being responsible for my family is because how I was raised is that I have to provide?
Now we need to hear
These things landed differently.
Okay.